the sun they never saw. The temperature in the boardroom seemed to drop 10 degrees the moment my father's voice cut through the glass-walled silence. "Effective immediately," he announced, his tone echoing like a verdict. "My eldest son, Ethan Caldwell, will assume the role of Chief Executive Officer of Caldwell Dynamics." The quarterly report slipped from my hands. Pages scattered across the polished floor, like the 15 years of my life that had just been swept aside. Around the mahogany table, board members shifted uncomfortably, too aware of the storm brewing behind my calm eyes. And Ethan, my brother, let a smirk spread slowly across his face, slick and oily, like gasoline floating over water. My father avoided my gaze, staring instead at the wood grain on the table, as if answers to all the world's problems were carved there. Behind him, the projector screen still displayed my presentation: 5-year growth forecasts, an expansion strategy across Europe and Southeast Asia, a development roadmap that could triple our valuation. Every slide carried my watermark, but none of that mattered, because this wasn't a meeting. This was an execution. My name is Daniel Caldwell. I'm 42, and this is the story of how I turned the deepest betrayal of my life into the most devastating victory. Ethan stood, pulling a folder from a leather briefcase he'd never once used for work. "Unfortunately," he said with fake regret, "we've discovered troubling discrepancies in Daniel's recent decisions. Unapproved financial risks, unauthorized contracts, potentially harmful actions that put the company at legal risk." It was all upside-down truth. The emergency loans I took to save this company from collapse were now reckless mismanagement. The contracts I revived, the relationships I rebuilt by flying across countries at midnight, were now questionable deals. For 15 years, I was a ghost running a machine no one believed in. While Ethan drank champagne in private clubs and burned money from corporate accounts, I worked 16-hour days rebuilding our father's failing tech firm from the ground up. I turned Caldwell Dynamics, a company with 3 months of life left, into a $150 million enterprise with 600 employees and 4 international branches. But sitting in that boardroom, watching my father hand my legacy to the wrong son, I realized something Ethan never understood. If you build the foundation of a kingdom, you know exactly which stone to remove to make the castle fall. Security appeared behind me. They had been waiting. My father finally met my eyes, cold, resolved, terrifyingly certain. This wasn't about succession. This was a purge. I rose slowly, adjusting my tie. "Of course, Dad," I said quietly. "Just remember, you're betting everything on a man who has never opened a financial statement in his life." Ethan scoffed. "I don't need to read them. I have people who do that." "No," I replied calmly. "You don't." I sent a text to my assistant, Lena. "Execute Plan C." Security escorted me through hallways I had walked for half my life, past the offices of people I hired, trained, protected. Some looked at me with pity, some with confusion. None of them knew that within 72 hours, each of them would receive an offer from a company that didn't exist yet, Northbridge Innovations, funded entirely by the $18 million I'd quietly grown through private investments. While Ethan and my father were distracted with the flagship corporation, I had created a subsidiary company legally holding all of our intellectual property, patents, algorithms, prototypes, buried in thousands of pages of documents my father had signed during chaos 3 years ago. Completely legal. But that wasn't my only advantage. Clients, 31 of them, they weren't loyal to Caldwell Dynamics. They were loyal to the man who answered their calls at 2 a.m., who flew across oceans to solve crises, who knew their children's birthdays and what their spouses were battling. All their personal contacts were stored in my private archive. When I reached the parking garage, my phone vibrated. "Lena, Plan C initiated. IT, legal, and R&D are quietly switching sides." I sat inside my Audi, paid with my own money, unlike Ethan's leased Lamborghini, and pulled out a second phone, the one connected to the security system I built myself. At home, I opened the live feeds. There they were, my father and Ethan, clinking glasses of 25-year-old bourbon. "Finally rid of the dead weight," Ethan said. "He never understood leadership," my father replied. All those numbers and strategies, leadership is charisma. I saved the footage, just for later. I already had 3 years' worth of evidence on Ethan. Insider trading, illegal transfers, hush money. I had hired a private forensic accountant the moment I noticed strange activity. The SEC, FBI, and IRS would be fascinated, but that could wait. First, I needed the company to collapse. The next 72 hours. Day 1. Talent exodus. I sent offers to every key engineer, strategist, and product manager. Better pay, better culture, better leadership. By Sunday night, 92% had accepted. Day 2. Clients. 31 CEOs got my calls. Remember the time Ethan insulted your COO in Monaco? Would you trust your future to him? Contracts evaporated in hours. Day 3. Intellectual property. All patents and software rights legally belong to Northbridge Innovations. Caldwell Dynamics owned nothing. Monday morning, 9 a.m., Ethan walked into the CEO office, pressed the power button on his computer. Instead of the login screen, a video. Him, handing a USB drive to the CTO of a rival company. My idiot brother's entire development roadmap, he said on camera. Just make sure the money lands in my offshore account. The video played, on every floor, on every screen. Phones rang simultaneously. The SEC, anonymous package, evidence. From my attorney. Lena stepped into Ethan's office, placed an envelope on his desk. Mass resignation, effective immediately, she said softly. Also, federal agents are waiting in the lobby. By noon, Caldwell Dynamics stock had flatlined. A company with no product, no team, no clients, a hollow shell. By 1 p.m., security walked Ethan out in handcuffs, down the same hallway where they escorted me. Only his path led somewhere much darker. The conversation with my father. I called him. Dad, everything's gone. The stock, the retirement fund, the house. I corrected him softly. Everything I built. You merely owned it. He begged to meet. The next morning, he and my mother arrived in my new office. She cried. He looked 20 years older. I let them wait 20 minutes, the same amount of time he made me wait on the day he crowned Ethan. You have nothing left, I told him, and Ethan is facing federal charges. He trembled. You planned this? For years? Since the day I realized you would never see me for who I truly am. We are family, he whispered. No, I said. Family supports you. Family values you. Family doesn't throw you out publicly for their favorite child. My mother reached for my hand. I stepped back. I slid a folder toward them. I'll buy your shares at original value. Hope flickered in their eyes. But there are conditions. You will never speak of Ethan's crimes. You will move to Florida. You will not contact me again. Your living expenses will come from a trust under my control. You're treating us like children, my father exploded. No, I said softly. This is how you treated me. They signed. At the door, my father whispered, I misjudged you, Daniel. No, I said. You misjudged everything else. My mother's voice trembled. I should have protected you. Those were the last words she spoke to me. 5 years later, Northbridge Innovations is valued at $2.4 billion. The old Caldwell Dynamics building stands empty, a monument to misplaced trust. Ethan served 3 years in prison. Now he mixes cocktails on the outskirts of Las Vegas. He sends postcards sometimes. I never open them. My parents live quietly in Florida, supported by the son they never believed in. Lena is now my chief operating officer, earning a 7-figure salary with equity. The 5 leaders who followed me became millionaires. Last month, Harvard invited me to speak on When Loyalty Turns into Weakness. I accepted, because I learned something. The greatest revenge isn't destroying those who wronged you. The greatest revenge is building an empire they must witness from the ruins of their own choices. When people ask how the overlooked son triumphed, I tell them, while everyone else played checkers, I played chess. But the real secret? I built the board, I carved the pieces, and I wrote the rules. In business, as in life, the one who wins is the one who creates the game. The son they never saw, the empire who never wanted. 5 years had passed since the fall of Caldwell Dynamics, but the shadows of that empire still lingered like dust in the corners of a room no one wanted to clean. I had built Northbridge Innovations into a titan, sleek, respected, unstoppable. but success has a cruel habit of revealing wounds you thought were healed. One autumn evening, as the sun dipped behind the skyline of Boston, I sat in my office surrounded by awards, industry plaques, and a view that overlooked the entire harbor. The world saw a man who had won, but inside, something felt unfinished. Winning is not the same as peace. Not when the battles you survived left ghosts behind. The unexpected letter. It arrived on a Wednesday, tucked in a plain brown envelope with no return address. My assistant placed it on my desk gently. Another investor? She guessed. I shook my head. No investor used handwriting anymore. When I opened it, the first thing I noticed was the careful, slanted script. Feminine, familiar. It was from my mother. Her words were soft, trembling across the page. Daniel, I don't know how much time I have left. Please, come home. I need to tell you something I should have told you long ago. My heart stilled. We hadn't spoken in 5 years. I could still remember the hurt in her eyes as I walked away, the guilt she carried like a burden too heavy for her fragile shoulders. And now she wanted to see me? Lena entered quietly, reading my expression before I spoke. Your mother? She whispered. I nodded. Are you going? I didn't know the answer. Return to the past. Florida was warm, humid, and unbearably nostalgic. When I arrived at my parents' modest house, the one they moved into after the downfall, I hesitated on the porch. The wood creaked under my weight, just as it had when I was a teenager sneaking home past curfew. My father opened the door, but he looked nothing like the man who once crushed my ambition with a single sentence. He was older, fragile in a way that frightened me. Daniel, he breathed. His voice broke. You came. His arms opened, hesitant. I didn't step forward. Mom? I asked, lowered his head. She's in the living room. She's been waiting for you. When I saw her, my breath caught. She was smaller than I remembered, thinner, her hair nearly white, her hands trembling as she held a blanket close. But her eyes, soft, warm, endlessly forgiving, were exactly as I had remembered them. Daniel, she whispered. A smile tugged at her lips. My boy. I sat beside her, unsure where to begin. She reached for my hand, and this time I didn't pull away. The truth she carried. There is something I must tell you, she said. My biggest regret, bigger than watching your father choose Ethan over you, is that I let it happen in the first place. She looked down. You were never his favorite son. Because, her voice cracked, because you are not biologically his. I froze. The air left my lungs. What? I whispered. She nodded, tears pooling in her eyes. I loved someone, before your father. A man kinder than the sun itself. But your father, he found out about us. He threatened him. He forced him out of my life. When I discovered I was pregnant with you, I thought he would soften. But instead, she swallowed hard. He punished you for not being his. My hands trembled. Years of coldness, years of rejection, years of being treated as an outsider. It all suddenly made sense. My father stood in the doorway, unable to look at me. Daniel, he whispered. I tried. God knows I tried. But every time I looked at you, I saw the man she loved. And so you took everything from me, I said. My voice was quiet but dangerous. You stole my legacy to give it to a son who wasn't ready for it. You punished me for a truth I didn't choose. My father buried his face in his hands. I can never undo what I did, he said, but I can tell you that watching you rise, watching you become a better man than I ever was the greatest pain and greatest pride of my life. Her last request, my mother squeezed my hand. Daniel, don't carry our sins any longer. Forgive him, forgive us, not for our keys, but for yours. Her breathing grew shallow. I'm so proud of you, she whispered. You became everything I prayed you'd become. Her hand loosened in mine, and more. And just like that, she slipped into the quietest sleep. My father fell to his knees. I caught him before he hit the floor. For the first time in our lives, we cried in each other's arms. The man who shouldn't exist. 2 weeks after the funeral, I received a call. A private investigator I hired. We found him, he said. The man your mother loved, your biological father. My blood froze. He lived in Oregon, a retired professor, a man who had no idea he had a son. I flew there without telling anyone. When he opened the door, he stared at me, speechless. His eyes, they were my eyes. We talked for 7 hours about my mother, about the life he wished he could have had with her, about the son he never knew existed. When I finally stood to leave, he said, "I have nothing to give you except this. I always wanted a son, and if you'll let me, I'd like to know the man you became." Healing the wound. Months passed, slowly, painfully, beautifully. I began to build a relationship with the father I was never allowed to know. Strangely, I didn't hate the man who raised me anymore. He was broken, flawed, human, and for the first time in my life, I saw him not as a tyrant, but as a man who feared losing love more than anything, a fear that cost him everything. A new legacy. On the 5th anniversary of Northbridge Innovations, I stood on stage in front of thousands of employees, the family I built myself. I shared my story, not the corporate version, the real one. A story of betrayal, resilience, love lost, love found, the long, slow healing of a man who spent his life fighting shadows he didn't understand. When I finished, the room was silent. Then, thunderous applause. After the event, Lena approached me. She looked at me with something I had seen for years, but never understood. "You did it," she whispered. "You finally became free." For the first time in my life, I felt it too. Freedom. Not from my father, not from Ethan, not from the past. Freedom from the weight of a story that was never mine to carry. Final moral. You cannot choose the family you are born into, but you can choose the family you build. You can choose the legacy you create. And sometimes, the greatest victories are not in destroying your enemies, but in healing the parts of yourself they tried to break.